My husband's sister tore apart my life by destroying my business and turning everyone against me with false accusations, so I collected evidence of her fraud and gambling debts and turned the tables at our family's Christmas dinner. My sister-in-law destroyed my life, and I'm about to destroy hers right back. I inherited my grandmother's Victorian house 2 years ago and thought I was living the dream, until Mason's sister Megan moved in 8 months ago, after losing her job. She claimed her roommate kicked her out, but I should have known that was bull from day one. At first, Megan played the grateful victim, helping with dishes and acting sweet, but she was planning her takeover the entire time. Within weeks, she had her makeup spread across my bathroom and her clothes filling my hall closet like she owned the place. When I complained to Mason, he'd say she's family and it's temporary. But temporary became permanent real fast when Megan started treating my inherited house like her personal kingdom. The worst part was watching her systematically destroy my wedding dress business that I'd built from nothing. I make $1,200 monthly doing alterations, which isn't much, but it's mine, and we need every penny. Megan would blast music during client fittings and invite friends over just to watch me scramble explaining to confused brides why there were random people eating chips on my couch. She'd answer my business phone telling clients I was overwhelmed and stressed, then hang up smiling like she'd done me a favor. Mason refused to see what was happening because his sister would cry about job hunting while secretly spending hours gambling online instead of actually looking for work. Everything exploded when I landed the biggest commission of my life designing custom wedding dresses for twin sisters worth $4,500. This wasn't just money. It was my chance to transform from basic alterations to high-end design work that could change everything for me. The moment I told Mason about the breakthrough, Megan's mask slipped, and I saw pure rage flash across her face before she started complaining about noise and disruption. She demanded I move my entire workspace to the basement, claiming my success was ruining her mental health and job search. When I refused, she gave me an ultimatum saying either the business goes downstairs or she tells Mason's family I'm forcing her out. Mason pressured me to compromise, so I spent $200 setting up a proper basement workshop with dehumidifiers and protective covers for the nearly finished dresses. That's when Megan struck like the snake she'd always been. While Mason and I were at his company party, she called sobbing about a burst pipe flooding the basement and destroying everything. We raced home to find my beautiful dresses reduced to soggy fabric scraps, and Megan playing the devastated hero who tried so hard to save them. She had already called a plumber who confirmed the pipe burst, while I stood there watching my dreams dissolve into wet garbage. I had to call those twin brides and tell them their wedding dresses were gone 3 weeks before their big day, then refund money I'd already spent on materials. But Megan made one critical mistake, thinking I was too stupid to notice the details. The water damage was perfectly concentrated around my dresses with no flooding anywhere else, and the basement window was conveniently opened for her garden hose. I went onto our computer and looked up the company of the plumber Megan had called. They didn't exist. When I checked our computer, I found her searches for faking flood damage and insurance fraud techniques, all done the day before her performance. Digging deeper, I discovered $6,800 in gambling debts to online platforms and payday lenders, which explained why she needed my commission money gone. The fake plumber was her unemployed friend, and the insurance adjuster immediately flagged the claim as suspicious because nobody else in the neighborhood had flooding issues. I spent weeks gathering evidence of her lies and fraud while she basked in family sympathy for being such a helpful sister during my tragedy. It was during Christmas dinner that I finally got my revenge. I stood up from the dinner table, my hands trembling as I held the folder containing everything. Mason's uncle had just asked me to say grace, and 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me expectantly. Megan sat across from me, cheerfully serving slices of chocolate cake while chatting about how she and Mason were planning to move in together permanently. My stomach churned when I noticed the small velvet box peeking out from her open purse beside her chair. Her phone buzzed on the table, screen lighting up with Foundation Inspector Urgent, clearly visible. My heart raced as I cleared my throat and began speaking. The words came out steady despite my shaking hands. I started with thanking everyone for coming, then mentioned how grateful I was for the truth about our flood damage finally coming to light. The effect was immediate. Megan's hand jerked mid-pour, sending red wine splashing across the pristine white tablecloth. Her face went pale as the dark stain spread like blood across the fabric. Mason jumped up immediately, grabbing napkins while shooting me a confused look. He touched my elbow gently and leaned in close, asking if we could speak privately in the kitchen. Behind him, I watched Megan's fingers fly across her phone screen, typing frantically to someone. The name Dr. Martinez flashed briefly before she angled the screen away. I had seconds to decide. Follow Mason and let him lead me away from this moment, or stay and expose everything right here in front of his entire family. My eyes darted to his coat hanging on the rack by the door. Earlier, I'd seen Megan slip something into the pocket when she thought no one was looking. Mason's hand pressed more insistently on my arm, and I let him guide me toward the kitchen. As we walked away, I heard Megan excuse herself, her voice artificially bright as she stepped onto the back porch with her phone pressed to her ear. Through the window, I caught fragments of her conversation. The words, documentation worked perfectly, and completely paranoid, drifting through the glass. The kitchen felt suffocating with Mason standing between me and the door. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing but now made my skin crawl. Before he could speak, chaos erupted in the dining room. The doorbell rang insistently, followed by loud knocking. Mason's mother's voice rose in alarm, calling for him. We rushed back to find 3 disasters unfolding simultaneously. A man in a hard hat stood at the door holding a clipboard, introducing himself as the Foundation Inspector. Mason's mother held up several pieces of paper, her face twisted in confusion and concern, saying she'd found these threatening notes in what looked like my handwriting. And behind the inspector, 2 police officers waited on the porch, explaining they'd received a call about a domestic disturbance at this address. My mind reeled trying to process everything at once. I moved toward the Foundation Inspector, trying to explain that I hadn't called for any inspection, but he insisted someone from this address had scheduled an emergency assessment. Megan appeared at my elbow, all helpful concern, telling the inspector she'd get the paperwork he needed from upstairs. She disappeared up the stairs while I fumbled through explanations with the increasingly suspicious inspector. The police officers had stepped inside, asking routine questions about who lived here and if everything was all right. Mason's family clustered in confused groups, whispering and shooting glances my way. Megan returned with tears streaming down her face, clutching a manila folder. She walked straight to Mason, her voice breaking as she said she was scared to live here anymore. From the folder, she produced printed screenshots of text messages, holding them so others could see. My late-night messages to her, taken completely out of context, looked obsessive and threatening on those pages. Mason's teenage nephew, quiet until now, suddenly piped up from his seat at the kids' table. He started recounting times I'd acted weird around Aunt Megan, like when I followed her to her room or stood outside the bathroom door when she was inside. The words sounded rehearsed but came out in his innocent 12-year-old voice, making them devastatingly believable. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, knowing the evidence of Megan's fraud was right there in my photos and screenshots. But as I tried to explain, one of the officers stepped forward, asking about the domestic disturbance call. Megan immediately volunteered her phone, showing him a series of texts that appeared to be from me, each one more aggressive than the last. desk. I watched the officer's expression change as he took notes, his pen moving across the pad with words like escalating behavior and potential threat. The foundation inspector grew impatient, demanding to know what was going on and who had actually called him. Megan smoothly intercepted, explaining about the flood damage and how I'd been under tremendous stress since losing my business. She managed to paint a picture of me as an unstable homeowner, making false claims while she tried to help manage the situation. Within 20 minutes, the police had filed their report with me listed as the agitated party and Megan as a concerned victim seeking protection. The foundation inspector left in frustration, muttering about false emergency calls. Mason's family stood in shell-shocked clusters, processing what they'd just witnessed. The next morning, everything accelerated. Mason's mother called early, asking Megan to help with paperwork for an emergency foundation repair loan. Apparently, the inspector's brief visit had revealed actual issues that needed immediate attention. Megan was suddenly indispensable, the only one who understood the insurance claims and contractor estimates. I tried to bring up the fraud evidence during a family meeting about the foundation crisis, but my insistence on discussing Megan's lies while the house literally needed emergency repairs made me look unhinged. Mason's aunt pulled him aside, and I heard her whisper about how this was just like when cousin Linda had her breakdown after her divorce. The family group chat became a nightmare. Every desperate message I sent trying to explain the truth got screenshot and shared, making me look increasingly unstable. Megan had started responding with concern and offers to help, playing the supportive victim perfectly. 3 days later, the foundation inspector called Mason directly. Someone had contacted his office before the Christmas dinner, expressing concerns about an unstable homeowner making false damage claims. The caller had claimed to be a concerned family member worried about insurance fraud. The inspector's visit had been a welfare check as much as a professional assessment. That afternoon, Megan produced a document that made my blood run cold. It was a lease agreement for my grandmother's house, with Mason listed as co-signer and dated just after the flood damage. Mason looked confused when he saw it, but Megan explained smoothly that he'd signed it as part of an emergency housing arrangement to help protect me during my difficult time. The signature on my line was perfect, matching my banking documents exactly. Sleep became impossible. I spent nights poring over evidence, trying to find the one piece that would make everyone see the truth. By the fourth day, exhaustion and panic drove me to Mason's workplace. I needed him to look at the evidence without Megan there to interfere. But my arrival, wild-eyed and demanding to see him immediately, only confirmed the narrative Megan had been building. Security had to escort me out while Mason's coworkers watched. That evening, Mason's best friend called me. His voice was gentle but firm as he explained that Megan had shared some recordings with him. Apparently, I'd been threatening to hurt myself if Mason left me. I listened in horror to my own voice, edited and spliced from various conversations, saying things I'd never said in that context. When I tried to explain, he cut me off. He believed I was sick, he said, but he couldn't enable this behavior anymore. The neighbors started watching me differently. Mrs. Chen from next door called Mason to report that I'd been taking photos of Megan's car at odd hours. The Johnsons said they'd seen me documenting who visited the house. Megan helpfully provided Ring doorbell footage that, when compiled, made me look like I was stalking her. My best friend Sarah met me for coffee, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Halfway through my explanation, she admitted that Megan had offered to do her wedding dress alterations for free and had promised to connect her with a network of brides worth thousands in referrals. Sarah insisted she believed me, but maybe I should consider that the stress had affected me more than I realized. I finally found something concrete when I proved Megan had lied about being at a job interview the previous Tuesday. I had photo evidence of her at the casino instead, but revealing this proof also revealed that I'd been following her, documenting her movements for weeks. Being right made me look more unstable, not less. The breaking point came when I discovered a hidden camera in the living room. My moment of triumph at finding evidence of Megan's surveillance turned to horror when I realized what it had recorded. My relief at catching her in lies, my small celebrations when I found inconsistencies, all looked like someone taking pleasure in others' pain when viewed through Megan's lens. By the end of that first week, we both understood what this had become. Winner take all. Either I proved Megan's fraud and saved my life, or she succeeded in painting me as mentally unstable and took everything. There was no middle ground left. The second week brought a new level of psychological warfare. Megan started seeing my former therapist, Dr. Patricia Holbrook. While confidentiality prevented her from accessing my specific records, Megan gained enough general knowledge about family behavior patterns to weaponize therapy language against me. She'd drop phrases about projection and displacement that sounded professionally informed. Two competing narratives emerged about the basement flood. Megan maintained it was an accidental burst pipe that tragically destroyed my dresses. I insisted it was deliberate sabotage. She had a plumber's statement and insurance documentation. I had circumstantial evidence and theories. To outside observers, one story seemed reasonable, while the other reeked of paranoid conspiracy thinking. My own history became a weapon against me. Megan found old text messages where I'd praised her helpfulness when she first moved in, thanking her for doing dishes and being so sweet. Now these messages were evidence of my sudden personality change, indicating a mental health crisis. The woman I'd welcomed into my home was using my own kindness as proof of instability. Mason's 8-year-old nephew started showing up at unexpected times, always when I was alone. He'd appear in doorways watching me search through papers or documenting evidence. His innocent observations about my behavior became ammunition at family gatherings. He mentioned how I talked to myself while looking through files, how I hid things when people entered rooms. The child genuinely believed he was helping his sick aunt by reporting these details to the adults who praised him for being so observant. The hidden cameras I discovered weren't just in the living room. Megan had installed them throughout common areas, capturing my increasingly frantic behavior as I searched for evidence. The footage showed me pacing at 3 in the morning, rifling through drawers, photographing documents with shaking hands. When compiled together, these clips painted a portrait of someone spiraling into paranoia. Meanwhile, Megan appeared calm and concerned in every frame, the worried family member trying to help. An emergency mental health evaluation was ordered after Megan presented her evidence compilation to family court. The judge reviewed footage of my late-night searches, testimonies from concerned neighbors, and documentation of my harassment of Megan. The evaluation was scheduled for the following week, giving me precious little time to prove my sanity by acting increasingly insane in my evidence gathering. One night, while Mason slept, I crept to his laptop. My hands trembled as I opened it, knowing this invasion of privacy was exactly what Megan had described to everyone. The browser history revealed his searches: how to help paranoid partner, signs of mental breakdown, supporting spouse through psychosis. Each search term was like a knife twisting deeper. The autocomplete suggestions showed he'd been researching these topics for weeks, guided by Megan's careful coaching. His email drafts contained ongoing conversations with Megan about getting me help. She'd sent him articles about personality disorders, warning signs of dangerous behavior, and resources for involuntary commitment. Mason's responses showed genuine concern and confusion. He wrote about my increasing secrecy, my accusations against his sister, my refusal to accept help. Every word demonstrated how completely Megan had manipulated his perception of reality. My former therapist, Dr. Patricia Holbrook, received a call from a concerned family member reporting reporting my escalating behavior. Though she couldn't discuss my case with Megan directly, the seed of doubt was planted. When I tried to schedule an emergency session to explain what was happening, her secretary informed me that Dr. Holbrook was fully booked, but could refer me to a colleague who specialized in acute crisis intervention. I attempted to record Megan confessing to her scheme. I positioned my phone carefully on the bookshelf, angled to capture our conversation in the living room, but Megan noticed immediately. She walked over to the phone, picked it up, and calmly asked if I was recording our conversation. When I stammered a denial, she simply nodded and handed the phone back, then told Mason I'd been secretly recording family members. Another piece of evidence of my paranoid behavior, documented and witnessed. The crisis escalated when I arrived to pick up Mason's nephew from school. I'd been helping with pickup duties for months, but that day I was running on 3 hours of sleep and frantic from discovering new evidence of Megan's fraud. The school secretary noticed my agitated state, how I kept checking my phone and muttering to myself. When the child saw me, he actually stepped backward, and I realized how I must look through his eyes. Megan had warned the school about my unstable behavior around children, and now I was proving her right. The wedding photographer who'd been willing to testify about the basement flooding changed her mind after Megan showed her a professionally edited compilation of evidence. The video included footage of me following Megan, documenting her movements, and celebrating when I found inconsistencies in her stories. Taken out of context and set to unsettling music, it looked like the behavior of someone having a breakdown. The photographer sent me a message saying she couldn't testify for someone who clearly needed professional help more than legal support. I discovered Megan wearing my grandmother's engagement ring one afternoon. The ring was slightly loose on her finger, but she wore it anyway, twisting it absently as she made lunch. When I confronted her, she explained with practiced calm that Mason had given it to her for safekeeping during my episode. She was protecting family heirlooms from being lost or sold during my mental health crisis. The ring that represented my grandmother's love and my family legacy was now on the finger of the woman destroying my life. Megan made her most calculated move yet. She offered to help me get the treatment I needed in exchange for signing the house over temporarily for my own safety. She presented it as an act of love and concern. The house would be protected, I would get help, and when I was better, everything would return to normal. The document she produced was professionally prepared, with provisions for my care and eventual return of property. All I had to do was admit I needed help. My refusal was seen as further evidence of my deteriorating mental state. Here was family offering support and treatment, and I was rejecting it. Mason's mother called me, tears in her voice, begging me to accept help before something terrible happened. She reminded me how Megan had helped them through her husband's depression, how she understood mental illness and could guide us through this crisis. The revelation that shattered my remaining confidence came when I discovered I'd been wrong about a crucial detail. The flood damage method I'd been so certain about was partially incorrect. The plumber's work order showed legitimate emergency repairs for a pipe that had indeed burst. What I hadn't realized was that Megan had orchestrated the original damage weeks earlier that necessitated those repairs. She'd created a genuine emergency to cover her sabotage, making my accusations of fraud seem like paranoid delusions. Mason had been documenting my behavior for weeks at Megan's request. He genuinely believed he was helping by keeping a record of my symptoms for medical professionals. His notes included every time I accused Megan of lying, every instance of searching through her belongings, every night I stayed up late gathering evidence. Reading his documentation was like seeing myself through a funhouse mirror, every action distorted into proof of mental illness. The evidence I'd gathered so carefully could be interpreted two ways. My photos of Megan's gambling, her lies about job interviews, her suspicious behavior, all of it could also be seen as the obsessive documentation of someone fixated on destroying an innocent family member. What I saw as proof of her manipulation, others saw as evidence of my paranoid fixation on my sister-in-law. Mason's mother faced an impossible choice. She could believe my wild story about her daughter orchestrating an elaborate fraud, or she could accept that I was experiencing a mental health crisis and needed help. She chose to protect her son's happiness with someone who understood mental illness. After all, Megan had helped them through her husband's depression. She knew how to handle these situations with compassion and wisdom. I started using Megan's own tactics against her, secretly recording conversations to document my sanity. But this meant I was becoming exactly what she described: paranoid, secretive, always recording and documenting. To prove I wasn't the person she claimed I was, I had to become that person. The paradox was suffocating. Mason's company Christmas party became my opportunity to access his personal laptop. I manufactured a chance encounter, arriving at the party as though I'd forgotten he would be there. While he was distracted by colleagues, I slipped away to the coat check where his laptop bag was stored. My hands shook as I downloaded files from his email drafts, knowing that security cameras were recording my every move. I had to act normally while stealing evidence, smiling at his coworkers who watched me with barely concealed concern. The files revealed extensive correspondence between Mason and Megan about my concerning behavior. She'd been building this narrative for months, long before the flood. Every small incident was documented, analyzed, and presented as part of a pattern. My normal stress responses to her provocations were reframed as unprovoked outbursts. My attempts to maintain boundaries were described as controlling behavior. Mason's ex-wife emerged as an unexpected ally to Megan's version of events. During recent interactions about their son's care, she'd noticed I seemed off. My questions about what the child had told her, my insistence that he was being coached, my visible anxiety during pickups, all confirmed what Megan had been telling the family. The ex-wife's testimony carried weight because she had no reason to lie, and every reason to protect her child from an unstable caregiver. Fighting to prove my sanity meant missing actual warning signs of my deteriorating health. The stress was manifesting physically, but I ignored the symptoms. Headaches, insomnia, weight loss, trembling hands, all dismissed as temporary while I focused on gathering evidence. My doctor left urgent voicemails about test results that needed immediate attention, but I couldn't spare the time or mental energy for anything beyond proving Megan's fraud. My bank accounts were frozen pending the mental health evaluation. Megan had been granted emergency financial power of attorney based on evidence that I was making erratic financial decisions. The money I'd saved for rebuilding my business, the small inheritance from my grandmother beyond the house, all of it was now under her control for my own protection. I couldn't even hire a lawyer without going through her. The confrontation at Mason's office Christmas party destroyed any remaining credibility I had. I'd had too much wine, trying to calm my nerves after downloading the evidence. When I saw Megan arrive unexpectedly, wearing my grandmother's ring and playing the devoted girlfriend, something inside me snapped. I confronted her publicly, my voice rising as I accused her of fraud and manipulation. Mason tried to calm me down, but I pushed past him, desperate to make someone, anyone, listen to the truth. Security was called. As they escorted me out, I heard the whispers following in my wake. Someone recorded the incident on their phone. By morning, the video was circulating on social media with the title, "Wedding Dress Ladies Meltdown at Office Party." 50,000 views in the first day. Comments poured in about mental health awareness and the importance of getting help. My business reputation was destroyed along with my personal one. The family arranged for me to stay in a motel, paying for it out of concern for my safety. They presented it as temporary, just until I was feeling knowing better. But I knew Megan was already changing locks and passwords, establishing herself as the stable presence protecting the house and Mason from my instability. She was managing everything with calm efficiency while I lived out of a suitcase, refreshing my phone obsessively as the view count on my public breakdown climbed higher. Mason's father appeared at my motel room one evening. His face was etched with genuine concern as he sat on the uncomfortable chair by the window. He spoke about watching someone you love disappear into mental illness, how his own brother had struggled for years before accepting help. He begged me to accept treatment before I destroyed myself and everyone who loved me. His words came from a place of real love, which made them infinitely more painful than any accusation. My frequent visits to the bank trying to access my frozen accounts had flagged security concerns. The teller who'd always been friendly now looked uncomfortable when I approached. She could only repeat that account access required authorization from my financial power of attorney. When I became agitated, security was called. Another scene, another confirmation of my instability, another brick in the wall Megan was building around me. The community sympathy shifted entirely to Megan. She was the one dealing with a partner's family member's breakdown while trying to maintain stability for everyone. Local shop owners who'd known me for years now offered her support and understanding. She gracefully accepted their concern while expressing hope that I would accept help soon. The narrative was complete. She was the hero, I was the victim of my own mind. My last supporter, a childhood friend named Catherine, met me at a park where we'd played as children. She listened to my story with increasing worry, but not for the reasons I hoped. Finally, she asked the question that shattered me. What if you're actually sick and just can't see it? How could I answer without sounding more paranoid? Every protest, every piece of evidence, every logical argument just reinforced her concern. In a desperate attempt to prove my sanity, I publicly admitted to the obsessive evidence gathering. I created a social media post laying out everything: the photos, the documentation, the following, the recording. I thought showing the evidence would vindicate me. Instead, it became the perfect demonstration of paranoid behavior. The comments filled with armchair diagnoses and recommendations for treatment facilities. I'd created the most damning evidence against myself. Reviewing my evidence with fresh eyes, I noticed something terrifying. There were gaps in my memory, moments I couldn't quite account for. Had I really been as careful as I thought? Some of my photos were blurry, taken with shaking hands. My notes became increasingly frantic and less coherent as the weeks progressed. The stress was affecting my cognitive function, and I'd been too focused on Megan to notice. An emergency restraining order was filed against me. The hearing was moved up due to escalating threats to household safety. My lawyer, appointed through legal aid since I couldn't access my funds, suggested I consider accepting the mental health evaluation. It would show cooperation, he explained, and might work in my favor. He didn't believe my story either. The truth was more complex than I'd imagined. Megan genuinely believed she was saving Mason from my toxic influence. In her mind, she was the hero of this story. She loved her brother and saw me as a threat to his well-being. The fact that she also gained a house, financial security, and a relationship was just the universe rewarding her for doing the right thing. Her delusion was as complete as everyone believed mine to be. To gather the final evidence I needed, I had to become the paranoid, unstable person everyone thought I was. I broke my last promise to myself about maintaining dignity. I waited outside Megan's therapy appointment, knowing she was inside discussing my dangerous behavior with my former therapist. When she emerged, I saw her car was unlocked. Without thinking, I dove inside, searching frantically through her belongings. My hands found documents tucked under the seat, printed emails, bank statements showing her gambling debts, correspondence with the fake plumber. But as I photographed them with trembling hands, I realized I was proving her point. Here I was, breaking into her car, violating her privacy, acting exactly like the mentally unstable person she described. Both of us were crying outside the same therapist's office for very different reasons. Megan's counterclaim gained momentum as my behavior escalated. She filed for emotional distress damages, citing the stalking, the public confrontations, the invasion of privacy. Her evidence was compelling. Videos of me following her, recordings of my accusations, witness testimonies about my erratic behavior. The legal system that should have protected me was being used to complete my destruction. Everything now depended on proving fraud before the court-ordered psychiatric hold began. I had less than a week to present evidence that would be believed over the mountain of documentation showing my instability. The race against time made me more desperate, more frantic, more like the person Megan had painted me to be. Every action I took to save myself pushed me deeper into the trap she'd constructed. The final phase of Megan's plan revealed itself when I discovered she'd been in contact with a developer interested in my grandmother's house. The Victorian property was worth far more than anyone realized, sitting on land zoned for commercial development. With me declared mentally incompetent and the house transferred for my protection, Megan would have the power to sell. The fraud was never just about destroying me. It was about stealing my inheritance completely. My attempts to document this new evidence were seen as further paranoid fixation. I tried explaining the development deal to Mason's family, but they saw only a sick woman spinning increasingly elaborate conspiracy theories. The more complex the truth became, the more it sounded like delusion. Megan had created a perfect trap where the truth itself was evidence of madness. As the psychiatric evaluation approached, I faced an impossible choice. I could continue fighting and risk involuntary commitment, or I could accept that I needed help and hope that compliance would eventually lead to freedom. But accepting help meant admitting to illness I didn't have, validating Megan's entire narrative. The countdown to the evaluation became a ticking clock on my sanity, real or perceived. The morning before my evaluation, I sat in my motel room surrounded by evidence no one would believe. Photos, documents, recordings, all proof of an elaborate fraud that sounded too complex to be real. I realized that Megan had won not by convincing everyone I was lying, but by making the truth itself sound like madness. In trying to prove my sanity, I documented my own descent into the exact behavior she'd predicted. The perfect crime was making the victim appear guilty of their own destruction. I desperately questioned Mason's nephew about things Megan had told him, cornering him at a family gathering. The child shifted uncomfortably as I pressed for details about what his aunt had been saying. His eyes darted toward the adults, and he asked why I didn't love Uncle Mason anymore. The question hit like a physical blow, confirming that Megan had been planting seeds of doubt even in the children's minds. The community had already chosen sides based on who seemed more stable in daily interactions. The grocery store clerk avoided eye contact when I shopped. The pharmacist double-checked my prescriptions with unusual scrutiny. Even the mail carrier hurried past my motel room without the usual friendly wave. Megan had become the sympathetic figure dealing with a family crisis, while I was the unstable woman everyone whispered about. During my psychiatric evaluation prep meeting, I discovered family court treated my accusations as symptoms needing treatment rather than crimes needing justice. The court-appointed advocate explained gently that we were there to help me, not prosecute anyone. My insistence on discussing fraud and manipulation was noted as continued fixation on perceived persecution. Every attempt to present evidence was reframed as a manifestation of my supposed illness. I remembered my grandmother's insurance agent from years ago and tracked down his number. He listened to my story about the flood claim with professional interest. My grandmother had worried about me inheriting the house too young, he admitted, and had discussed safeguards. His willingness to investigate the suspicious claim gave me a glimmer of hope, though he warned that insurance fraud was difficult to prove without concrete evidence. The insurance investigation provided partial vindication when irregularities in the claim were discovered. The adjuster found inconsistencies in the documentation and the suspicious timing of the incident. However, this validation couldn't reverse the family court's mental health concerns. I had proof of insurance fraud but was still considered too unstable to manage my own affairs. The truth existed alongside the perception of my instability, neither canceling out the other. My grandmother's safety deposit box had been inaccessible due to legal complications mentioned in her will. The key required both the executor's signature and proof of mental competency. After weeks of legal wrangling, I finally gained access. Inside were letters my grandmother had written about our family's history of addiction and mental illness. The letters confirmed a pattern I'd never known about, but they also showed my strength in breaking the cycle. She knew this might happen but trusted me anyway, one letter explained. My grandmother had watched her own daughter struggle with paranoia and had seen the signs in other family members. She'd left these letters as both warning and encouragement. The family history of mental illness was real, but so was my grandmother's faith in my ability to overcome it. The safety deposit box also contained a video my grandmother had recorded just months before her death. In it, she warned about financial predators who might target me after inheriting the house. She spoke directly to the camera about the importance of protecting family assets from those who would manipulate their way into ownership. The video was dated and witnessed, providing crucial evidence that my concerns about financial exploitation weren't paranoid delusions. The video showed my grandmother's complete mental clarity as she discussed specific scenarios that might unfold. She mentioned relatives who might suddenly need housing, romantic partners who might appear interested in the property value, and the importance of maintaining sole ownership. While she didn't name Megan specifically, her warnings aligned perfectly with what had transpired. Watching my grandmother's video, I realized I was facing a complex truth. The fraud was real, but so was my genetic vulnerability to stress-induced episodes. Megan's manipulation had triggered a legitimate mental health crisis, while simultaneously orchestrating actual fraud. I wasn't simply right or wrong, sick or well. I was both a victim of elaborate deception and someone genuinely needing mental health support. This revelation changed my approach entirely. Instead of fighting to prove I wasn't sick, I committed to getting help while continuing to fight for the truth. For the first time in months, I showed actual stability by accepting the complexity of my situation. I scheduled therapy appointments, agreed to stress management treatment, and approached the legal issues with newfound calm. Megan's overconfidence finally created the opening I needed. In her sworn affidavit for the restraining order, she included detailed lies about specific incidents. She claimed I had threatened her on dates when I could prove I was elsewhere. She described conversations that never happened, citing witnesses who would testify differently. Her need to embellish the truth became her downfall. Working with my lawyer, I presented evidence calmly and methodically. Instead of my usual frantic insistence, I let the documentation speak for itself. The video evidence from my grandmother, the insurance investigation findings, and the contradictions in Megan's affidavit created reasonable doubt about her version of events. For the first time, my demeanor in court matched my claims of stability. The turning point came when Megan's mask slipped during cross-examination. Asked about specific dates and times, she began contradicting her own written statements. Her voice rose as she insisted on versions of events that didn't match her previous testimony. The calm, concerned family member facade cracked, revealing the calculating person underneath. The judge noticed the transformation, making notes as Megan's composure deteriorated. Legal momentum shifted as more inconsistencies emerged. The fake plumber was located and admitted to helping stage the flood. Bank records showed Megan's gambling debts aligned with the timing of the fraud. The forged lease agreement failed handwriting analysis. Each piece of evidence I'd gathered frantically over months was now being presented professionally, carrying weight it hadn't when I was perceived as unstable. The family court ordered a full investigation while placing the house in protective custody pending resolution. Neither Megan nor I would have access until the legal matters were settled. This compromise acknowledged both the fraud allegations and my mental health needs. It wasn't complete vindication, but it prevented Megan from selling my inheritance while investigations continued. Mason's testimony revealed the depth of his confusion and pain. He genuinely believed Megan's concerns were valid based on my increasingly erratic behavior. He thought documenting everything was helping me get treatment. His voice broke as he described watching someone he loved disappear into what he thought was mental illness. He'd been manipulated as thoroughly as everyone else, but his pain was real. The judge ordered comprehensive evaluation of all evidence while maintaining protective measures. Handwriting analysis confirmed the forged documents, revealing that Megan had been planning this for months before the flood. Financial forensics showed money transfers and gambling activities that supported my timeline of events. The investigation revealed systematic fraud alongside my genuine mental health crisis. The evidence proved elaborate fraud, but also revealed my real stress-related health issues. Medical records showed weight loss, insomnia, and cognitive effects from prolonged stress. The victim was vulnerable but not delusional, the court concluded. Megan had exploited my genetic predisposition to stress while orchestrating actual crimes. Both narratives were true simultaneously. Megan's breakdown during final testimony revealed her genuine delusion. She sobbed about deserving the house after saving Mason from my toxic influence. In her mind, she was the hero who protected her brother from an unstable partner. The fraud was justified as payment for her emotional labor. Her conviction that she deserved everything she'd tried to steal was as complete as any delusion she'd accused me of having. The judge offered me a choice: pursue full criminal prosecution or accept a negotiated settlement with mandatory therapy requirements. Criminal charges would mean lengthy trials, continued family division, and reliving the trauma repeatedly. The settlement would return my property, provide financial restitution, and include restraining orders while requiring both Megan and me to undergo treatment. I chose healing over pure revenge while insisting on consequences for the fraud. Megan would face criminal charges for forgery and insurance fraud, but I wouldn't pursue the emotional distress claims. I would undergo therapy for the legitimate stress-related issues her manipulation had triggered. It was a compromise that acknowledged the complex reality of our intertwined breakdowns. The house was returned to me with strict restraining orders preventing Megan from coming within 500 feet. Financial restitution covered my business losses and legal fees. Megan's assets were liquidated to pay gambling debts and court-ordered damages. She received probation with mandatory psychological treatment for her own delusional beliefs about deserving my inheritance. Family relationships fractured permanently along lines of belief. Some relatives understood the fraud once evidence was presented clearly. Others remained convinced that Megan's mental health concerns were valid, even if her methods were wrong. Mason's family split between those who felt betrayed by Megan and those who believed she'd been trying to help. The truth was too complex for simple reconciliation.